David, are you fucking ready to start this fucking podcast? Taking a page out of Steve Martin's book, honorary Canadian Steve Martin, in my opinion. I didn't know John Candy was Canadian. Martin Short's Canadian. He just seems like he fits in with that crowd.
Is it because his hair was white when he was like in his 40s? As if like it's dusted by snow?
I mean, that sounds good to me. I don't know if that influenced my decision at all, but he does feel Canadian. He's got the like Midwest mannerisms down, but then you just kind of turn him up a little bit more, and that's Canada, essentially.
I can see that. I agree with that. Works for me.
Pop Culture Podcast. My name is Brandon, and with me, as always,
Dewey, as is my nickname. No, I'm kidding. My name's David.
I was almost going to break because David was talking. He cut me off the first time I was going to do the intro, and then he just like locked in and started saluting the camera. And I made it through there, but I almost didn't. So we're off to a good start again.
Also, I wanted to say two things. First of all, I'm not wearing the Sandlot shirt, sadly. I forgot. I just put on a random shirt today. So there goes that streak. And second of all, we got to see if we can break the 19 F-word streak from Planes, Trains, and Automobiles in this episode.
Thank you for counting, because that was going to be one of my fucking questions.
Well, you know, I just happened to find out in the fucking notes. So it was pretty fucking easy.
Nice. Okay, I'm liking this already.
We're going to get it done in like the first 2 seconds, to be honest.
And we're going to get demonetized immediately.
As if we were ever monetized.
That's very true. Yeah. Come on, people, tell your friends. We need to start making some money. I can't do this for much longer.
Come on, guys.
Before we start, I would like to acknowledge the fact that there is a non-zero chance that we kill Ringo or Paul this week, or God forbid both. And don't even get me started on killing Steve Martin. I think that would break me personally, but I'd like to throw that out there because I hope by acknowledging it, we won't be killing anyone.
Please.
But today is the day that we lost Dick Cheney. Good. That's about it. Moving on.
Kissinger last year, Cheney this year. That's all I'll say.
We got a good streak going. I wonder who's next, Trump. Okay. Anyway, I wanted to ask you before we get into our eternal question this week. Xania Monet, have you heard of her? It's pronounced it's spelled Xania.
I have heard the last name Monet, as in Janelle Monáe, but I've never heard of Xania Monet.
Yeah, well, I don't even know if that's how you pronounce her name, or should I say its new name.
What?
It has a song on Billboard's R&B airplay chart, except it isn't a person, it's an AI, and it's our first AI song on the radio.
Oh, God, no.
So, yeah, Xania Monet. It is a fake black woman, in case you were wondering, and it's an R&B song. I have not listened to it. I will not be listening to it because it's not music. But yeah, it's crazy, and the discourse around this has been ridiculous because it's mostly been what I've seen. It's mostly been people saying, this just shows that music is stupid and it sucks now because it's so formulaic that an AI can make it. Yeah, and you wonder like why an AI can make it. Maybe because it's been trained on like every single song ever. So that pissed me off. And I get it's rage bait, but still, come on, people. What are we doing?
Just because the AI makes bad music doesn't mean the actual music out there is bad. Like, you know, you're nitpicking. You're choosing stuff that fits your argument.
Yeah.
FAI. It's like the AI actress. I don't remember her name.
I unfortunately do. It's Tilly Norwood. And I don't know if we should even be calling it an actress because it's not. It's an AI. It's nothing.
Yes, it's a thing.
Right.
It's nothing. It's not anything.
It's not even like a being.
No, it's an it.
Fucking clanker.
Clanker.
But now it's time for my eternal question. What have you watched in the past week?
I'm going to talk about 2 things I watched. Now, neither of these things are 2025 movies. So I'm not going to be talking about my list. That being said, hopefully this weekend I'm going to see 2 movies that might make it on my list, so we'll see. But I actually went back to last year and watched The Substance because I never saw it when it came out. I missed it in theaters, unfortunately, even while everyone else on the whole freaking planet, aside from you, had seen it, because everyone was going crazy for that movie. And I watched it, and I can see why. It's really good. It's fun. It's a 4 out of 5. Honestly, that might go up in the future. I feel like it's a very rewatchable movie, in a very like body horror type of way. If you don't like body horror, don't watch it. But if you do, go for it, because it's very fun. And it's also like, it's very of our time, I feel like. It does the classic horror thing of taking, a story about something and like putting it into horror to kind of hide what it's really about a little bit. So obviously the substance is about like beauty standards, all that kind of stuff, how Hollywood treats women, all that kind of stuff. And I thought it did it very, very well. And then the other movie that I saw, I wanted to bring this up because I saw it in a very special place. But the other movie I saw was one of my favorite, or I'll say it, my favorite Spielberg movie, E.T. And I saw it at the Academy Museum, and it was a really great experience. I saw it on a big screen with a lot of people that were laughing and probably crying at the end. And I mean, that's a 5-star movie for me. That's his best movie, hands down. And that brings me to the question of, what do you listen to? And what is your song of the week?
Yes, well, I'm going to start by saying I listened to some music live this week. I went to a concert in Madison.
Ooh.
And I saw a band that I've talked about many times before on the podcast, the band Camino. And if my calculations are correct, this was the 3rd time I have seen them. And I think that means I have seen them the most of any artist. It was a very good show. They're incredible, as always. The Sylvie is where it was at in Madison. Great venue. Unfortunately, it was built by Live Nation, so fuck Live Nation, fuck Ticketmaster. But
F Live Nation.
Yeah, I'm already trying to hit that limit on 19. We might be there already.
We probably are, to be honest.
Anyway, it doesn't take away from the fact that the venue's very nice, and it was a great show. They had 2 openers, both of which I'd never heard of. One of them was very good. The other one was all right, but I could see the appeal, just not really for me. Yeah, so anyway, the band Camino, shout out. They played a lot of new songs off their new record, which is still sitting pretty comfortably in my top 10 albums of the year. And I can tell you right now, it's definitely going to make it, because it can only fall like 3 spots at most, and that means it's still there. So
that's amazing.
That is what I saw this week, watched, I guess, and also listened. But I also listened to something else that is hoping to challenge the band Camino on my top 10 of the year. It's an album called Hypocrite by Versace. I just learned how to say his name. It is Versace, but it's spelled with Z-A-C-H because his name is Zach inside of it. And I always thought it was a Versace because that would make sense because his name is Zach, Anyway.
Yeah.
The album's called Hypocrite. It's his first album in over 4 years. I thought it was very good. And I feel like this is going to be one that is more of a grower. I thought it was great initially, but I feel like I'm going to like it more as I listen to it more. It's very understated. It's quite like simplistic sounding at first, but it's really textured and brilliantly produced. And also, interestingly, it is kind of in that bedroom pop space that we had talked about with Claro that kind of doesn't really exist anymore. He's one of the few artists that's still doing it. I was very impressed with this, so shout out to him.
That's very fun.
He's an independent artist as well from Canada. So we already got Canada going. Like, we're doing great. And then I got a fucking song for you. This song is called The Shelf by Julip, Julip. I have never heard of this artist before, and it is pretty interesting. I heard it in New Music Friday. I don't really know what to say other than it's very strange, and it's under 2 minutes long. So if that sounds like something you would like, it's somewhere along this kind of like bedroom pop thing, but I don't know what it even fits into. But shout out to Julip. And yeah, that was my song. And with that,
I think it's time.
This album is the Beatles' Revolver. You may have heard of them. This album was released August 5th, 1966 by Parlophone Records in the UK and Capitol Records in the US, both of which were part of EMI at this point. EMI was broken up in 2011, I believe it was, and Parlophone was inherited by Warner. Capitol was inherited by Universal, and Universal ended up getting the rights to the Beatles catalog.
Right.
The album was preceded by a double A-side single Eleanor Rigby, and Yellow Submarine. And that was it. No other singles from the album, which is very unique, especially for them, because they were churning out albums 2 a year, maybe even 3 a year sometimes. They wanted to sell these albums, so it was weird to only have 2 singles from this one, but they did. And it sold really well in the UK. It was critically acclaimed, but it didn't sell very well in the US because John Lennon said that the band was bigger than Jesus, which is ultimately kind of what got him killed. But, that's something for you to do your own research on. And honestly, I think that was probably true. The band was huge. They were everywhere. I was just telling David before we were recording that there's a Wikipedia article called Timeline of the Beatles, and it just lists every single date and what they were doing on it. And it's insane that we have this amount of information about them, and also that people care that much back then and still. Like, they kind of were the original rock stars. So shout out to the Beatles somewhat. This album was seen as the start of their psychedelic era, and so much has been written about this album and them as a band, and I don't really feel like I necessarily need to give you any more information on it because I feel like everyone either knows about them or is able to find out about them because they are probably the most written about band ever. So instead of giving you more information, I want to ask you a few questions. I wanted to ask you, what have you heard from the Beatles before, and did you know any of the songs from this album?
So I grew up with the Beatles. They were one of the main bands that we'd listen to, along with, Queen, Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, stuff like that. So I know the Beatles very, very well. I don't know like all of their songs because it's not like I've listened to every single album all the way through, but I know like a majority of the songs from the majority of their albums. And even the albums that I don't know very well, I know at least like probably half. So I do know the Beatles quite well. And I also know some of the music they did on their own, especially John Lennon and George Harrison. George is my favorite, and I will stand by that, and no one can tell me different. And then I know one song by Ringo.
Did you know any of the ones from this album?
Yeah. I mean, I know a lot of the songs from this album. I haven't listened to it all the way through, and honestly, coming back to it, not to spoil things, but I kind of feel like this album had some of Paul's best work, but not the best of John and George.
Very interesting.
Not to spoil what I think, but yeah. And I will say, coming back to this album, I think I have realized that Rubber Soul is better in my opinion, because I know these are kind of lumped together in a lot of ways as 2 albums.
And then I also wanted to ask you, well, I guess I should give some context. We listened to this album on Spotify. The primary edition of it is the 2009 remastered version. It is weird. As I was preparing my notes, I thought there has to be a different like recording mix master of this album, and there is, the 2022 version. And I assume you started listening to the 2009 version. And I wanted to ask you, did you listen to this on headphones or speakers? And how noticeable were these aggressive, I guess, kind of faux stereo recordings where they were clearly mono, but then panned aggressively to one ear or the other?
I mean, it was pretty aggressive. I kind of used to it because I've listened to the Beatles on headphones for years now. So I am used to it, but it's definitely like a weird experience. But yeah, I listened to the 2009, whatever it's called, version, I guess, or re-release or remaster. And I remember you sent me the 2022 one, and it had like 63 songs or something because it was made out of like 4 discs, which I don't understand.
It's 63 songs, it's demos, it's alternate takes of every song. There's some like extra songs that they recorded that didn't make the cut of the album. But I did want to ask you, did you end up listening to any of the songs from the 2022 remaster, or I guess it was technically a remix?
I did not, but I honestly kind of want to see what it's like.
Well, I will say that it is significantly better, and ended up actually raising the scores of a few of the songs because they just sound cleaner and like they're mixed for modern speakers. So I thought that was probably the best way to listen to it. And I'm going to link in the description of this episode both the 2009 version, which is closer to the original, and then the 2022 version, which is closer to, I guess, how it would have been perceived at the time because we listen to music so differently now. I think it's very interesting. I personally prefer the 2022 version, though. I will say that. I specifically noticed it on Eleanor Rigby because that was one of the songs that I knew from this album before listening to it. And I thought, this sounds like shit on the 2009 version. Like, it's really bad. And then I eventually even went to YouTube to like find if it was just like that, and it wasn't. So I don't know what happened with the 2009 version, but they did a really bad job with it. So no shout out to whoever mixed and mastered that.
I'm going to have to go and listen. I want to see the difference. But I actually wanted to throw one of the earlier questions you asked me back at you. What did you know about the Beatles? Had you listened to this album at all before?
I've not listened to this album, but I know a handful of songs from it. I would say probably 4. I'm much more familiar with their big singles and kind of the compilation album One more than anything else. I don't know if that's what my parents had that we listened to when I was growing up, but I knew most of the songs most of the songs I knew were not on this album. And I picked this one for one specific song, which we'll talk about when we get there. But I have to say one last thing before we jump in. All songs on this album were produced and mixed by George Martin, who was essentially their guy forever. And then I wrote down your favorite will be, and then I never actually wrote down what I thought your favorite will be. So I have literally no idea what I was thinking because I don't think I ever thought it.
Do you want to take a randomized guess right now?
I think your favorite will be I Want to Tell You.
That's a very interesting choice.
I really don't have any reason to choose it, I guess. It was just one that kind of stuck out to me while I was looking through the titles again, but I unfortunately forgot to do that part. So, do you have any predictions for me?
You know what? I'm going to say Eleanor Rigby just because I know that you know that song. That's going to be your favorite. Yeah. And your least favorite is going to be... Okay, I should have actually thought of that before I started saying it, but I think it's going to be Love You Too.
Oh, okay. Side 1, track 1, Taxman, written by George Harrison, who also sang the lead vocals on this song. This one is about the Beatles getting taxed at what they thought was too high of a rate, especially since so much of that money was being used to spend on wars, which they were very much against. I complained about socialist media not working for me, and I think this is actually a good example of it working. The song leans on the blues a lot. It feels more like a lament, and also learning about it makes it seem like actually it wasn't really a socialist song and they were just bitter about like being rich and kind of having to pay their fair share, even though I do agree with them that that shouldn't have had to fund the war. But I do think that the emotion that they tap into informs the song in a way that a lot of like protest songs don't really get. Like, even though this may have come from a place of not really being a critique on what we think it is, it does feel informed by that emotion. So I will say I was impressed with that. And this is a 3.5.
This song is a song that, I've heard many times before. It's never really been a favorite of mine. And this is, again, part of what I was talking about where even though George is my favorite Beatle, I feel like his songs, particularly in this album, are not the strongest. I feel like his best work that he did, like when he was with the Beatles, came in the later albums. It's just not my favorite style of the Beatles. It's a little like loud and kind of brash. It's not a bad song though. It's still 3.5. I still enjoy listening to it. I will still throw it on if it's part of a playlist or something, but I'm never going to really come back to it that much, even if I still kind of enjoy it. 3.5.
We're starting off on the same note.
I was surprised. I thought you would be lower.
Well, see, I'm full of surprises because I actually kind of do like the Beatles, and I don't think that all old music is bad. I almost screwed that up. Anyway, I do think that the Beatles are very good because they lean into the pop element a lot more than a lot of old music where it's a lot more rock oriented, which is not really my home genre.
I think this is a win for me as the Beatle fan of this duo.
Track number 2, Eleanor Rigby, written by John Lennon and Paul McCartney, lead vocals by Paul McCartney. This is the only song without the band playing the instruments, which gives it a completely different feel. I'm pretty sure this is the only song of their career without the band members contributing instruments to it. This is just fully recorded by an orchestra. I don't know for sure, but I thought that is what I read, and then I couldn't find it anymore, so I don't really know. I do think that this is a little Black Sabbath effect because this is the best song on the album easily, and it might be the best song of their career. This is a 4.5. I've always loved this song, and it is incredible.
Wow.
So you were correct.
Haha, I got it.
I was off my game this week.
It's fine. You'll get me next week, so we'll be fair and square. This song is one of my 2 favorite songs on the album, so you still have a chance. But yeah, I mean, I agree. I think this is one of the best songs of their career. It's not my favorite song, and I think that they do have quite a few better songs, which I think only speaks to the strength of them as a band. I certainly think that this is one of Paul's best songs, and this is a big reason why I think this album, has some of Paul's best work compared to the other Beatles. And yeah, it's kind of like, what can you even say about this song? Everyone knows it, and it's a classic for a reason. It has, in my opinion, some of their best lyrics. I don't know how the hell he wrote those lyrics or came up with them or anything like that. And I also wanted to shout out the fact that they used a string quartet and still made it sound like a pop rock song. Like they pulled it off. It's a 5. I think this is actually a perfect song. No notes.
To me, this is the direct precursor to Viva La Vida, the song by Coldplay.
I can see that.
And both of them are incredible. I like Viva La Vida a little bit more because you get more of that modern production to it. But the string arrangement in this is incredible. And I'm pretty sure it was done by George Martin, who's kind of like the uncredited 5th member in a way, where he's doing so much work behind the scenes. I mean, he played a bunch of instruments on here, all that. Like, you can look it up yourself because there is endless information on this. And yeah, I mean, this song is just so great. And this is the reason that I chose this album, because I was like, well, I might as well, like, you said we need to do the Beatles. And I was like, well, I want to do my favorite song by the Beatles then, which of course is Eleanor Rigby. I think it worked out. Not to spoil it, I like this album.
I will say I'm very excited for when we do Rubber Soul, because I feel like that's my favorite album probably of theirs. So I want to see what you think. But
I'm excited to do John Lennon and Yoko Ono's music.
I'm excited for before I say this, I want to say this is not me talking about Yoko Ono's character, just her singing. I am excited about the John parts, not the Yoko parts, because she cannot sing. I'm sorry.
Speaking of John Lennon, track number 3, I'm Only Sleeping, written by John Lennon and Paul McCartney, with lead vocals by John Lennon. This was one of the 3 songs that Capitol Records ended up cutting from the American release of this album, and I realize now that I never looked at what the other 2 are, and I didn't see it written anywhere when I was doing research for it. But anyway, this song they said was bad, and they cut it. Also, interestingly, this is the first time a backwards guitar solo was used in popular music.
Oh.
Which is just crazy to me, that like something as normal, I guess, as like reversing a recording was them. They were like, let's do it. And who knows if it was them or if it was George Martin, who I always want to call George R.R. Martin, who I'm pretty sure is the Game of Thrones author.
Yeah, who's writing a novel for like 20 years at this point. Very different.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the reason that Game of Thrones season 8 was bad or whatever. Anyway, I did want to say that the backwards guitar solo kind of gives a haunting feeling to this song. It's very interesting. It's kind of weird. And I think that this is one of the standouts on the album that I had never heard before. This one's a 3.5. I enjoyed the song a lot.
I agree. I think that this should not have been cut. And I think that if it hadn't had been cut, then American audiences' response would have been a lot better. I feel like this song kind of shows you the difference in John and Paul's styles. It kind of feels like in a way this was the beginning of their diverge, as they both kind of got deeper and deeper into their styles, which I mean makes sense considering that this is also the first like quote unquote psychedelic album from them where they started to really experiment and try things. I have always liked this song. I do kind of forget about it, and I do think that other people kind of sleep on it, but it just works. It's a very short song, which I'm always happy about. And I do think that like the little breaks throughout it do hurt it a little bit, but regardless, I still think it's a really good song. It's a 4 for me.
Track number 4, Love You Too. 2 is spelled wrong. but I think it's supposed to be Love to You is like the thing, and they're trying to make it a play on words with Love Me Do, but
Yeah.
whatever. Written by George Harrison, and he also sang lead vocals on this. I get why you say that this was George Harrison's like worst work. This isn't my least favorite song. I have a different least favorite song, but this one wasn't like great. And I also wanted to say, somehow this is the second time we've had a song with a sitar on the podcast. I mean, we have a few more coming up.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy.
Also, both of them were within the month of November, which I find very interesting.
Yeah,
that's true. I imagine it will be a very long time until we hear another sitar. Also, I was waiting for this note. I couldn't remember where I put it. I'm starting to realize that I might like George Harrison's vocals the best of anyone in the group. I would probably rank them George, John, Paul, and then Ringo, but only because there's one song sung by Ringo on here, and I feel like I've never really heard his songs. And then I said, then again, maybe that's on purpose. Anyway, this I feel like is a cool idea for a song, but the execution is not really there at all. It's a 2.5. It's not like bad, but it's just not something I'm probably ever going to listen to again.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. Or actually, no, you know what? Scratch it. I agree with all of that, actually. I also want to say I love Ringo. I think he's honestly like overlooked. I think he is so fun. He's also a pretty damn good actor. But sorry, he's not the best vocalist. I'm sorry. I think his voice really works for like fun songs. Like Octopus's Garden, which is in another album. But it doesn't like work for much beyond that, even though I still like love him. He's just so much fun. But I actually agree with your list. George is my favorite, and that comes to both like his style and his vocals. And on top of that, he really is a fantastic guitarist who I feel like is kind of slept on when compared to like, you know, the heavy metal and hard rock guitarists that would like play with their teeth and stuff. But yeah, I feel like this song does fall short. I don't like hate it. I think, like you said, certainly an interesting idea. I like the idea of bringing the sitar into, you know, rock, experimenting with it, all that kind of stuff. It just ultimately doesn't really work the way it's done here. And it's also a 2.5 for me. So we are in agreement.
Is this your least favorite song on the album?
This is, this is, sadly. I don't want to put George, you know, in the lowest, but, you know.
I also did want to say that the sitar and kind of the Indian elements of their music was provided by George, because he kind of just like, was like, I want to explore Indian culture, and he did. So shout out to him. This is like actually a George song.
Yeah, no, 100%.
Even if it isn't like great, you know. But his vocals sound great, I think.
They do. No, they do. I agree with that.
Now we get a 3-word title with an and in between. Track number 5, Here, There, and Everywhere, just like Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Written by John Lennon and Paul McCartney, and the lead vocals are by Paul McCartney. This song is a very classic sounding ballad with what I would classify as 50s influence in its arrangement, especially of the vocal harmonies and kind of the background oohs and ahs or whatever. This is a ballad, so I must hate it, right? No. In fact, I think this is a really good song. I do think other people have done this type of song better, therefore it is a 3, but I do think it is very nice.
This song is also kind of a part of why I think that this album kind of, in a way, belongs to Paul, because I think this is a fantastic ballad. Everyone knows I like ballads. These are the types of ballads that I do really like. It's not the best ballad from the Beatles for sure. It's not even the best ballad from Paul himself, but I think that this is, you know, one of the best songs on the album. And I wanted to also give Paul kudos for keeping it quiet and very simple. I feel like before, you know, I've always talked about how I don't really like a very minimalistic production, but this is the type of minimalistic production that I do like, because I feel like the melody is still there, the music is still there while still being very simple. And this is actually a 4.5 for me.
Nice. I agree with most of that. I think this is really good. I do think that because it sounds like the 50s, I kind of think of some of those 50s songs that I like more, but it's not like to discount this song. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Ringo time. Track number 6, Yellow Submarine, written by John Lennon and Paul McCartney and sung by Ringo Starr. They make my boy Ringo sing the weirdest songs on the album. And I'm going to say something that is absolutely insane, which no one else will agree with. This song gives me the same feeling as a lot of the songs from Boards of Canada's album that we did earlier in the year. It feels like childhood, but like kind of like haunted and spooky in a weird way. I do like this song though, and I think the mixing on the 2009 version was awful and made it borderline unlistenable. But the 2022 mix is a lot better, and it actually bumped it up to a 3.
For me, this is the type of song that Ringo should be singing on because I feel like his voice fits here. It's just a very fun, wacky song. I agree in some part with what you said. I get what you mean with like the vibe, and I do agree with that. I honestly just want to not work and just sail around the world in the Yellow Submarine myself. That's kind of all I have to say about this song. That's just what it makes me think of. Like, I don't have much to say about the song itself. I just want to sail around and not do nothing. Pretty much. It's a 4.5 for me. It might be my nostalgia factor too, because I also grew up with the movie and I love the movie. But yeah, it's high up there. It just, it's just so much fun and it's so innocent and you just get Ringo singing. And I feel like his voice actually really fits this specific song. So there you go.
Track number 7, She Said, She Said, written by John Lennon and Paul McCartney, although it was actually written by John Lennon and George Harrison. The lead vocals were sung by John Lennon on this song. This is where I offer a little bit of Ringo praise. The drumming on this song is great. People shit on Ringo all the time for being a bad drummer. And it sounds great, and I think he did what he should have, because otherwise the Beatles wouldn't have been successful,
I completely agree. I think that he is underrated as a drummer, actually.
This is one of the only songs in the Beatles discography to not feature Paul McCartney on it because he walked out over a disagreement about the arrangement. And fuck it, maybe he was the problem. I don't actually mean that, but the song is really good. And this actually was the biggest surprise of the album for me. This is a 3.5. It might actually be in contention for a 4 because I think this is really good. And I was not expecting this at all.
That's exciting. I do want to say, going to your point about Paul walking out, everyone was always like, oh, they broke up because of Yoko, blah, 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 blah. That may have been part of it. Obviously, I don't know. We weren't there. But they had problems long before Yoko, and John got together. That's all I'm going to say.
All I'm going to say is I think John was the problem himself.
Well, I think that they were all partially the problem, even if some of them were more of the problem, like John, because I do agree that he was a very hard person to deal with from what I've heard. Back to the song. Yeah, I think that this song, the reaction you had to this song is kind of the reaction a lot of people have to this song, because it is really good. It's more of a rock sound compared to a lot of the other songs, at least to me, which does, make me a little surprised that you liked it so much and that it's almost a 4, especially because it's a 4 from me. So we're very close to having the same score. I also did want to say I am so happy about the lengths of the songs on this album. After like multiple albums with 5, 6, 10-minute songs. Kudos to the Beatles for that.
Yeah, especially after listening to the Elton John one. It's crazy how different the lengths are.
Oh, yeah.
Side number 2, track number 8, Good Day Sunshine, written by John Lennon and Paul McCartney, with lead vocals by Paul McCartney. I did want to ask you a question that I thought of with this song. Do more male singers and songwriters say that their woman is theirs versus more female singers and songwriters say that their man is theirs? I think yes. I think the men are more likely to say that girl is mine.
I think so too.
But anyway, that was what I had thought. I don't care for this song. This is a 2. This is the worst song on the album, in my opinion.
The song was never one of my favorites, to be honest. I think it's a fine song. It does kind of feel like the type of song that you would hear at a cafe that you can barely hear because of people talking and stuff, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. This is the style from Paul that I actually don't really like. And this is the style that I feel like he kind of leaned into more and more, especially into his solo career. And that's why I've never really gotten into his work as a solo artist or with, the Wings or his multiple other projects. Because, even though I think that he still had good songs there that I do like, the majority of his work from that time kind of feels like this, and I just don't like it that much. This song, it's not bad. It's just kind of repetitive. It's a 3 from me. It could have been better.
This is one of the songs that I would imagine Capitol Records cut, but you never know because they may have just made terrible decisions, considering that they cut like one of the better songs on the album.
Exactly. The such a stupid decision that I don't get at all. But hey, corporations are going to corporate.
Track number 9, And Your Bird Can Sing, written by John Lennon and Paul McCartney, with lead vocals by John Lennon. This song has been rumored to be about John Lennon's first wife, Cynthia. I was reading about their marriage a little bit, and I had to mention that John was dating a girl named Thelma Pickles, which I think might be one of the greatest names I've ever heard. Sounds like a cartoon character.
That's amazing.
Also, she turned him down because she was engaged. Well, this is Cynthia turned John down because she was engaged, and he said, "I didn't ask you to fucking marry me, did I?" So he really got in the spirit of Neil Page there. Also, John Lennon was abusive to her, no surprise there, so no shout out to him. He can burn in hell, just like Dick Cheney. Anyway, he wrote a pretty good song though. This is a 3.
Yeah, I did not know that this was about their marriage.
Reportedly. I don't know for sure.
Well, reportedly. All 4 of the Beatles were certainly very interesting people. Some more interesting than others in certain degrees, if you get my drift.
Ringo?
I don't know much about Ringo, to be honest. Ringo was just there, like, drumming.
Ringo's getting the Colin Firth treatment on this episode.
Kinda, yeah. He's just there. I mean, it's just like all of them, I feel. Or not all of them, but I know things about some of them where I'm like, yeah, that they were not the best people. What can you say? That being said, I have some things to say about this song, i.e. that I always forget this the song exists too. I think you can tell that I don't listen to this album that much or the songs from here because I've said that like 3 times already. But it's a nice song. I like it. It's not as good as some of the other ones, but it's still nice. It's a 3.5. I don't have much else to say.
Track number 10, For No One, written by John Lennon and Paul McCartney, with lead vocals by Paul McCartney. The song started, and I thought that I probably rated it too high, and then the chorus hit, and I was like, oh my god, this is great. This is also a very short song, yet it somehow has 3 choruses. So artists nowadays, please take notes, because we are releasing songs that are longer than this, like 2.5 minutes, and they have 2 choruses. Like, come on, guys. What are we doing? We know the chorus is the best part of the song. You can play it, you can sing it more than 2 times. Also, this song has a key change, which is something that I say I hate, and sometimes it just works, which I've also said, but I will say in old music, it works a lot better for me generally. This one actually is a 3.5, and I think it's mostly carried on the strength of the chorus because it is just so good.
I agree with you that the chorus is so good. I did not remember this song, but this is actually a 5 for me. This is one of my 2 favorite songs along with Eleanor Rigby. It's that good. And that, like, a large part of that is the chorus. And again, I feel like it's simplicity just done right.
Track number 11, Dr. Robert, written by John Lennon and Paul McCartney, with lead vocals by John Lennon. The real Dr. Robert could be Robert Freeman from New York City, who would give people vitamin B12 shots laced with amphetamines. So shout out to that concept.
Oh, damn.
It also could be Robert Fraser, who is an art gallery owner who dealt drugs to the band. John Lennon says it's actually about himself because he always had drugs for the band. Directly from Wikipedia, I want to read this quote. It could be John Riley, a dentist acquaintance of John and Cynthia Lennon, George Harrison, and his wife, Patty Boyd. At a dinner party attended by Lennon and Harrison and their partners in March of 1965, Riley had laced their coffee with LSD, providing the 2 Beatles their first experience of the drug. I thought that this was an absolutely insane story, and I wanted to share it because this is like, what were we doing in the 60s? He's just like, oh, let's have a nice fun dinner, and then put LSD in their coffee?
It was a different time.
Come on, man. Anyway, it also could be Bob Dylan, who supposedly introduced the Beatles to marijuana.
Good old Bob.
This song is fine, and it's kind of just whatever to me, so it's a 2.5. I don't really want to hear it again.
Yeah, a song that I don't really remember, and that's for a reason, because it's not really memorable or that interesting. It's interesting because a lot of people say like, "Oh, this is the album where they started to experiment." And like this is the first psychedelic album. To me, it kind of feels like this album is the last album right before like they really started to actually experiment and they really started to get psychedelic and stuff, you know? This feels like them kind of clinging on to like their previous style, and I think this is the best example of that.
I definitely get what you're saying. The one pushback I will have to that is I did not experience the Kesha effect on this album, which to me means that the songs are different enough from each other that I could see it being like more of an experimental vibe. But I do understand what you're saying because I do think they kind of do get a little more weird and eclectic with it later.
Yeah. No, I definitely think that it had started, but it hadn't gotten to a level where it like had really started. They were at the very beginning of it. But yeah, this is a 3. It's not a bad song, but it's just kind of a little boring, a little blah.
Track number 12, I Want to Tell You, written by George Harrison, who also sang lead vocals. I guess I should have known that this was bad. I mean, you didn't say George Harrison was your favorite at this point. This is a 2.5 for me. I'll say that. I don't have anything to say about the song. It didn't capture me at all. It's fine.
It's interesting that you said this was my favorite song. I actually don't hate the song. I think it's a nice song. It just doesn't really catch me that much. And I'm not a big fan of like the like little extended sounds that they make. I honestly find that a little bit grating, but it's still a nice song. It's a 3.5. It still works for me, even if I don't think it's like the strongest.
Track 13, Got to Get You Into My Life, written by John Lennon and Paul McCartney with lead vocals by Paul McCartney. This song is about weed. It's a 3. That's all I got to say. It's fine. This part of the album, like these last kind of 4 songs, I was just kind of like, okay, like it's fine. There's nothing wrong with these songs. They're just not like super interesting. It just kind of feels, it's a little Maroon 5 effect where, you know, you get some of the more interesting stuff at first and then it's just kind of like, all right, sure. And this album's only 34 minutes long, I think. So it's not like fatigue or anything. It's just like, they kind of ran out of ideas towards the end.
It is a short album, but there's a reason why it's never really been my favorite album. I just don't think it's at the same level as a lot of their other work. That being said, I do actually enjoy this song, even though I do agree that like the second half of the album is a lot weaker than the first half. I don't think that this is near Paul's other work. Well, was this written by Paul and John?
Technically, all of their songs were written by the two of them, but they also kind of do like a breakdown. Usually, the indication is whoever's singing lead vocals on it wrote more of the song. So this is one that Paul wrote a lot more of.
So yeah, I mean, comparing it to the other songs that he wrote or wrote more of, it's not as strong for sure. But I still do really enjoy it, and I think that it still really works for me. Although I will say, I do feel like you start to see the parts where he starts to like shout out lyrics more as the song progresses and kind of get wild, which you also see in like Hey Jude, where he's just like singing Hey Jude and like shouting it for 3 minutes at the end of the song, which I enjoyed. Like I still like Hey Jude, but you do start to see that here. I feel like, again, that's just them kind of starting to go into their styles more. But this is a 4. I like this song. I think it's kind of a highlight of the weaker second half.
I agree with you for sure. I think that this one is one. Actually, I might say that this is the one that could grow on me the most of any of the songs, because I feel like it did already. I started at a 2.5 and I went up to a 3, but I feel like there is more here to it. It just like for some reason didn't capture me immediately. But I do get what you're saying about Paul. I feel like he's kind of leaning into his worst tendencies in a way. Which, yeah, maybe that's the reason that it'll never be a 4 for me or whatever. But I don't know. I could see this going up to a 3.5 maybe if I listen to it some more. Track number 14, Tomorrow Never Knows, written by John Lennon and Paul McCartney with lead vocals by John Lennon. It's only fitting that we end with a sitar. I did also want to say that John's vocals sound kind of weird at one point in this song. It's because they were recorded through a Leslie speaker, which we actually talked about on Black Sabbath's album. And that's how they modified Ozzy Osbourne's voice on Planet Caravan, which came out, I think, 3-4 years after this. So they would have probably gotten that from the Beatles. I don't know if they were the first ones to put a voice through a Leslie speaker, but they were probably one of the first, considering that they also reversed a guitar and were the first to do that, which is crazy to me. I still can't believe that. Anyway, I think that this is a cool song, and I feel like this one also has a potential to grow on me, but there isn't like a ton to latch onto because it is kind of one note, literally. Like they play the root note throughout the entire song in the sitar, and it's just kind of like an ambient drone throughout it. So this one is a 3, but it's not like bad, you know? Like, I mean, obviously 3 means it's a good song, but it's very interesting. I'll say that.
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely tell how they did kind of bring a lot of things about. They kind of invented a lot of techniques because of how experimental they were. But yeah, I agree with this song. I think it has some interesting parts. It just kind of meh at the end of the day for me. I do like, again, that they're bringing in the sitar, that they're trying things. In a way, this kind of feels like the most experimental song out of the whole album, which kind of works in the sense of like, you know, they're ending the album by jumping off into the more experimental that follows into their following work. So it does work very well on that level for me, even if the song itself is just kind of fine. And it's actually also a 3 for me. So we are in agreement there too.
I think it's interesting that you say this is one of the most experimental songs on here because I agree with that. This was the first song they recorded for this album.
Wow, that's ironic. That's really ironic.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Damn.
Kind of a cool thing. It's a good one to end on, I think, as well. It does give you that more experimental edge that they'll have later, but it also does feel kind of like a closer because it is kind of that.
Yeah.
It's more grand, more broad in a way. Anyway, we've reached the end of the album, and I wanted to say, this might be the first time I've listened to an actual Beatles album front to back because I just know the compilation so much, which isn't technically an actual album. So this was an interesting experience, and I was like, I already thought that I was going to enjoy their music, but I actually enjoyed it a lot more than I thought. And I'm actually going to let you choose my score for me because I am stuck between 2 numbers. And those numbers are a 3, which feels too low, and a 3.5, which feels too high. So what do you think I should give this genuinely? Because I'm leaning towards a 3.5, but I don't really know.
I will bring up one thing that I think should tip your score to a 3.5. And that is the fact that there are at least 2 songs on this album that you said could grow on you the more you listen to them and go up. I think because of that fact, it should be a 3.5. And I'm not just saying that because I love the Beatles. Like, genuinely, that makes me think that it should be a 3.5.
I think that's fair, and I think I will lock that in. I mean, also, you have Eleanor Rigby on here, which I said is the best song of their career. And I think that will probably be my take until the end of time. I think I will do a 3.5 for this. And I'm curious, are you going to go higher than me?
Yes, I am. I am going to a 4. Again, this is not my favorite Beatles album by a long shot. You know, we kind of discussed about how the first half is a lot stronger than the second half. That being said, I still think it's a good album. It still has a lot of great songs. And I am honestly very excited to listen to some of the albums that I consider to be my favorite, to see what you think, considering that you gave this album a 3.5. And I kind of consider this to be a slightly lower tier album, even though I do think they have worse albums. But I just feel like this is on the lower end.
We have talked about a lot about artists kind of being at the forefront of their genres across both film and music. And this is a rare case of them being at the forefront of their genre and actually still holding up. A lot of the time, it's, we see other artists kind of take those conventions that have been invented and run away with them, do something more interesting, kind of perfect that sound. Honestly, I feel like the Beatles still hold up as like a great band. And I don't really know why. I feel like it just has to be their pop songwriting ability.
That is honestly a part of their genius. I think that's why they are so good, because they do just hold up. And I know, obviously, like, I think that some other bands that you don't like do hold up, especially when it goes to rock. But, you know, I know we have agreed about some other bands from the 80s and 90s or artists from the 80s and 90s that, we can see the influence, but we might not really like them that much. I think the reason why the Beatles are so good is because they do still hold up. And not only can you tell like how they influenced everyone, but they're still so good regardless of that.
And I think some of that is also the experimental edge that they have, where maybe some of their newer albums, or sorry, some of their earlier albums don't hold up as much. But once you get into the later part of their career, they are doing all kinds of unique things. I mean, I learned researching this that the Beatles are responsible for world music existing as a genre, which is mostly due to the influence of Indian traditional music that George brought to them. And then they were just starting to experiment with things. And I don't want to, like, it doesn't feel right to say a white British person invented world music, but in a way they like kind of did / like helped popularize it. I still am discovering new parts of their influence that I didn't even know existed. They really were like one of one at the time, and I think probably will be one of one for the rest of time.
I agree with that. I don't think that we will ever have anyone like them again in their kind of specific space. Because obviously I think that we have had people like them in different spaces, but that's obviously relative to that specific place or space, whether that's a genre or a style or, movies or music or whatever you want to say. So I completely agree. And I think that, to your point, the reason why they kind of feel so fresh is because they are kind of hard to pin down. There are so many different things throughout their career. They're rock, but then they're also pop rock, but then they're also psychedelic rock. There's so many different things that it feels fresh from itself almost, which is kind of crazy to say.
I absolutely agree. I think this was a very successful first album of the Beatles for me and first album for the podcast. It's a very interesting one, and I'm kind of glad we started with something a little bit more off kilter. So shout out to me for loving Eleanor Rigby and forcing us to do this album, I guess. But now, the main event, what everyone has been waiting for, something that I can't believe I haven't said already. It's the Thanksgiving episode this week. Obviously, the Beatles have nothing to do with that, but this movie has everything to do with Thanksgiving. And it's time to talk about Steve Martin and John Candy.
It's time to talk about the most famous teen movie director. And of course, we're not even talking about a teen movie today, which is ironic. But we are talking about Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, one of the few Thanksgiving movies. Like, are there even any other ones, to be honest? I can't think of anything.
I can't think of any, and this is probably going to be the only Thanksgiving episode we ever do because there's no music about Thanksgiving as well. So enjoy it while it lasts, everyone.
Yeah, this is why this is kind of an unofficial Thanksgiving or unofficial holiday episode, because like our Halloween, we did a whole month for, because that's, you have horror movies. But since we are like, there's like one or two Thanksgiving movies, this is just a one-off thing. So if you guys want to celebrate Thanksgiving more, just go watch Friends. But now, to get into Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, I gotta hear what you think about the IMDb logline. A Chicago advertising man must struggle to travel home from New York for Thanksgiving, with a lovable oaf of a shower curtain ring salesman as his only companion.
That works for me, I think. I feel like that's pretty much the story, and it doesn't give away too much of what's going to happen, the adversity that they're going to face.
I agree. The one thing I'm kind of like not sure about is describing John Candy as a lovable oaf. I'm like, I don't know if the word oaf fits. He's definitely lovable, but I don't know.
I will say he is lovable, though.
He is so lovable.
Big fan.
I adore John Candy. And this is actually the only movie I've seen that he's in, like out of his filmography, crazy enough. That being said, let me tell you who worked on this movie. The movie is, of course, produced, directed, and written by John Hughes. The cinematography is by Donald Peterman. The movie is edited by Paul Hirsch. The music is composed by Ira Newborn. And the movie is distributed by Paramount Pictures and stars Steve Martin and John Candy, amongst others. So, Brandon, what is the main thing that every single writing professor and teacher tells you to do when it comes to getting your ideas.
Write what you know.
Exactly. And that's exactly what John Hughes did. Because this kind of happened to him. Now, this was before he kind of achieved success as a writer or director. He was working as a copywriter. So he had to go to New York to give a presentation. And he, of course, is famously from Chicago, lived in Chicago his whole life, set a lot of his movies, if not all of them, in Chicago.
And shot them almost all in Chicago, too. Shout out.
Yes, also true. Shout out. Support local production. Except please also get production to Los Angeles because we're dying over here. But anyways.
Yeah, literally both. Please produce movies and TV shows in general.
And release them in theaters. Not the TV shows, but the movies.
But anyways, make 22 episode seasons for all shows.
And give your writers residuals.
Standardize broadcast lengths of episodes so they're not like an hour and a half or 2 hours like Stranger Things is going to be.
Oh, I hate that. I hate that so much. But anyways.
Anyway, John Hughes.
John Hughes went to New York and gave a presentation in the morning with a plan to take a plane back to Chicago in the evening. Of course, winter storms, just like in the movie, canceled his flight. So he had to go and find another one. He did, only to get rerouted to Des Moines.
Des Moines.
Who cares? Not kidding. I'm kidding. Don't at me.
Bitch, you've never even been to Iowa.
It's all flat there in cornfields. Who cares? No, I'm kidding. I care. Des Moines. So yes, he got diverted to Des Moines and then got diverted again to Denver. And then again to Phoenix, where he was finally able to get on a flight 5 days after he was supposed to.
5 days?
5 days. Yeah, it was 5 days.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, can you imagine that? Just being in the same clothes, just like going from plane to plane for 5 entire days. Yeah, I mean, it affected him so much that he went and wrote the first draft in 3 days of the script, which he is famous for writing first drafts of his scripts like really fast. But regardless, 3 days is kind of crazy. That's like, I don't even know how many pages, 40 pages a day or something. Of course, Hughes would go on to become very famous for the teen movies that he made, which I would argue are more famous than this film today, even though this is, in my opinion, his best film. But, you know, he's very known for his Bueller's Day Off, The Breakfast Club, 16 Candles, etc. And after making a string of teen movies, he kind of wanted to branch out because he was like, oh, I don't want everyone to think of me as the teen movie guy, which he kind of is remembered like that nowadays, I feel. And the initial draft of the script for Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, after he had kind of worked on it, you know, revised it, etc., ran 145 pages long.
That's pretty impressive, actually. I can't believe there's that much material.
Yeah. I mean, that's, if you follow the 1 minute, 1 page rule, that's over 2 hours. That's like 2 hours, 25 minutes. And this actually confused Steve Martin when he first read it. Like, he literally asked John Hughes, how many pages are you going to be cutting? And John Hughes was just like, cutting? What are you talking about? Because he wanted to film it all. Now, yes, he went to Steve Martin because he really admired him. He had worked with John Candy before, and, you know, he had always admired him and he brought him on, but he had never worked with Steve Martin, and he actually considered him to be the funniest man alive. So he took it to Steve Martin, and Martin agreed largely because of 2 scenes, and I want to know if you can guess what those 2 scenes are.
I was going to say one of them is when Del kisses his ear.
No, actually.
Oh, shit. I feel like the other one might be when the car blows up or starts on fire.
It's actually not.
Wow, I'm terrible at this.
Well, okay. One of them was when he says the F word 19 times. That was one of them, which I thought you would honestly guess.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. For me, all the scenes that you listed would be reasons to do the movie, so I get it. The other scene that kind of that made him decide to join was the seat adjustment scene in the car. That was the other one.
That does feel like a very Steve Martin coded bit.
Very much so. And in many ways, it does seem like the 2 leads were cast as characters that were very similar to themselves, which to a lot of people might seem crazy when they see the character of Neil Page, because they know Steve Martin as this very kooky, very like fun comedian. But it does seem like he is actually a very shy and introverted person in real life. And I actually have a quote from a colleague of his, Tom Smothers, who remarked, quote, "Spending time with Martin is like being alone," end quote.
That's
like, it seems like he's just very, very shy.
That is like either the nicest thing you could say about somebody or like the most insane, and maybe both.
But I mean, I think it's telling that he does have like such strong friendships with people like Martin Short and with John Candy, because they did become friends. And when it comes to John Candy's similarity to his character, I actually have a quote from Martin himself. He said, quote, "Well, he was a very sweet guy, very sweet and complicated. And so he was always friendly, always outgoing and, funny and nice and polite. But I could tell that he had kind of a little broken heart inside of him," end quote. Which I think in many ways is the character of Del. And I think honestly that John Candy kind of brought a lot of himself into this role. Now, I did want to talk about one other character when it comes to casting, because Hughes actually cast a character during the filming of Ferris Bueller's Day Off. He approached Edie McClurg, who plays the principal's receptionist in Ferris Bueller, and he asked her to read the car rental scene. She did, and then he just walked off, took the script and said nothing. And then several months later, she received a call asking if she would play the car company receptionist. I think that she didn't even realize she was auditioning at the time. When it came to the shoot, it was very long and hard, because the cast and crew were traveling across the whole Midwest and East Coast in search of snow, but whenever they found it, it just started to melt right away. So they had terrible luck with that. Hughes also seemed to be very grumpy on set. I think he was going through personal issues. I don't know exactly what, but it was seemingly eating at him. And then there was also the fact that John Hughes shot over 600,000 feet of film, which was twice the industry average at the time. So he was shooting so much, which, I mean, yeah, the script is 145 pages. Obviously, he's going to shoot a lot. There was another complication that no transport company wanted to appear inept or deficient, so they didn't want to appear in the film. They were like, yeah, no, we're not going to show like our train breaking down or being delayed by weather. So because of that, the crew kind of had to create their own transit companies, and they had to like buy track and build terminals.
I was wondering about that, because obviously it's like Contract or something like that, which is supposed to be Amtrak. And then the car rental is Marathon, which isn't real. The airline is American Airlines, though, which I'm 90% sure is real because I've flown on it for like my entire life. How did that happen?
Yeah, I do wonder if American was kind of like, you know what, everyone knows we're so bad anyways that we might as well just like be in the movie. I could see that happening. I don't know.
They're honestly pretty good these days. I will say that.
I guess it's more United that's the really bad one now, isn't it?
United is ridiculously bad.
Now, there was also a lot of improvisation on set. Hughes actually told McClurg to improvise her phone conversation. So she was like, all right, I'm just going to literally draw from my own life and pretend that I'm talking to my sister about Thanksgiving. That includes the part where she's like, yeah, I can't cook. Another part that was improvised was during the scene where they meet the character of Owen, played by Dylan Baker, who of course is the guy that gives them the ride in the pickup truck and, is like Stubbville, all that kind of stuff. Now, Hughes was not satisfied with the way the scene was going, and he knew that Steve Martin was a clean freak, or is a clean freak. He seemingly is like scared of germs, like really, really scared, to the point that he might be like almost a hypochondriac or something like that. So Hughes went to Baker and he said, before you shake Martin's hand, wipe away spit from your mouth and then just go for it. And Baker did. And because of that, the scene in the movie, the look of disgust on Martin's face is real, because that's the shot that they used. And the moment that Hughes cut, yelled cut, he ran away to like wash his hands because he was so like disgusted by the spit. Now, multiple things were changed during the editing of the film, including the ending. Originally in the script, and I haven't read it. I've read part of the script. I haven't read the full thing, and I was having trouble finding out like specifically how it is in the script. But seemingly, what happens in the original script is that Del actually boards the train with Neil and kind of meets him at the next station, and that's where he reveals, everything about the fact that his wife died and that he doesn't have a home, pretty much. But when editor Paul Hirsch and John Hughes were kind of going through the scenes that they were editing, they decided that they didn't really like it. It didn't really fit. They wanted Del to kind of take the hint and allow Neil to at least start going home alone. And that's when they discovered that when they were filming on the commuter train in Chicago, on the L itself, at one point, they had just let the camera run without telling Martin. And of course, like, they weren't actually filming a scene. They were just relaxing in between takes, setting other stuff up. And because Martin didn't know, he was just daydreaming, thinking about his lines, just thinking to himself. But because they had been filming the whole time, they got all of his genuine reactions. And as it turned out, they fit in perfectly with the flashback scenes that Hughes was thinking about using throughout the film. In the ending that you see in the movie, when Steve Martin is sitting in the train and you kind of see him thinking about, Del kissing his ear, and he laughs when he thinks about, his wife, and he kind of makes that little thing with his mouth showing that he's hungry for things, for the turkey. All of those moments were not scripted. That's all Martin kind of on candid camera, just thinking about life, just thinking about whatever, daydreaming. And they all kind of got that by accident. And that changed the ending to where he kind of realizes that something is not connecting. And then he returns to the station, and that's where he finds Del. And because of this, they actually have a little continuity error in the film because they did not shoot the commuter train coming back into the station from the other direction. So they just reversed the footage. So in the movie, if you look close enough, you see the train depart along the same track and then come back along the same track, which does not make any sense. But they had to do what they had to do. Now, the first cut of the movie ran 3 hours long. Sorry, not even 3 hours. 3 hours and 40 minutes long.
Jesus. Okay, Ridley Scott.
I know, right? They eventually got this down to 2 hours, then test screened this, and then further cut it down to 1 hour and 33 minutes, which is, of course, that's the final length pretty much.
Which is pretty short, I will say.
Yes, it is quite short. I feel like it's a good length for the film, though.
I agree.
I feel like it doesn't need more because they actually got rid of a lot of stuff, including a whole subplot where Neil Page's wife believes that the reason why he is late is because he's having an affair. Yes, this is real and in the original script. And this is something that I remember reading when I read through like half of the script, and I never really liked that part. I felt like it didn't really fit with like what the movie was about.
No, it's like, this is our family. We're going to be together. Oh my God, he's secretly cheating on me. I agree. That should have been cut, and I'm glad it was.
I'm very glad it was cut. Another thing that was changed was when the policeman stops them when they're like right outside of Chicago because of their car. Originally, in that scene, he doesn't stop them, but he stops them partially because of the car, but that scene is longer because when he finds out that they're trying to get to Chicago, he tells them, oh, you actually overshot Chicago. You're in Wisconsin right now. And what follows is Steve Martin beating up John Candy's character. So that's why in the scene after that scene in the movie, John Candy has a black eye because they cut out that section of the scene. And I had to point that out because Wisconsin mentioned.
Exactly.
For you,
that is pretty hard to do when you go through the suburbs of Chicago. You know you're going through the suburbs of Chicago because they are some of the largest, like longest suburbs that you've ever seen in your life. There are a few like errors in the movie that, like, I don't know, I'll talk about a little bit, but ultimately I'm okay with them.
Yeah, and I'm like, I get why they cut it because it's not really necessary. So
Right. Yeah. We don't need to necessarily see Steve Martin beating him up as well. It's kind of like, all right, we got that. They hate each other. Okay. But they don't all the time.
Now, there was another part that was cut because it was deemed too dark by test audiences, which this seems kind of crazy to me. So I don't know how true this is, but this is what I saw on IMDb. It seems like at some point after Dell tells Neil the truth, he was supposed to open the trunk to reveal his wife's remains in it, which...
What?
Yeah, I don't know why.
Oh,
yeah.
Man.
I don't know how true that is, but I'm happy they got rid of that too.
Every time we talk about a movie that's like good, it always seems like they were so close to ruining it in every single way. And it's kind of a miracle that they didn't.
Really. I 100% agree with that. Really, really true. Now, the movie came out November 25th, 1987. The day before Thanksgiving. And it was a success. It grossed $49.5 million on a $15 million budget. And it was also critically acclaimed. A lot of people noted that it was a departure for Hughes from his previous teen-oriented movies. And Steve Martin and John Candy also received a lot of critical acclaim, with a lot of people noting how they kind of brought their own inner selves into the characters. Sadly, and yes, I am saying sadly because I think this is a really good film, the movie did not receive any nominations at the Academy Awards, either for Hughes, Martin, or Candy. That being said, it's still a classic, particularly as a Thanksgiving movie. Again, as I said, I feel like people mainly know John Hughes for his teen movies. That being said, a lot of people still do know this film and love it. And Steve Martin, he continued his creative success with movies like Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, The Father of the Bride trilogy, and most recently, Only Murders in the Building. John Candy also continued to appear in successful films such as Uncle Buck, which was also directed and produced by John Hughes. Even though he never seemed to really hit the same level of success as Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, which might have been in part due to the difficulties of his life that included problems with his weight, alcohol abuse, and more. Candy was unanimously beloved by everyone. Everyone noted his kindness and caring, including his tendencies to put literally everyone before himself. John Candy sadly passed away in his sleep at the age of 43 on March 4th, 1994, from a heart attack. And I thought it was important to kind of just give him a little in memoriam, I guess, yes. Because I do feel like he truly was an amazing person who, had his demons. But I think in many ways he is overlooked as an actor and a comedian. And I think that this film is the best proof of how good he really was. John Hughes also continued directing, even though arguably the movies that followed Planes, Trains, and Automobiles weren't as successful as Planes, Trains, and Automobiles and his teen movies. But he still did have a success as a director. That being said, when John Candy passed away, who was a dear friend of John Hughes, he actually decided to stop directing. Actually, Vince Vaughn, who was a friend of Hughes, actually said, quote, "He talked a lot about how much he loved Candy. If Candy had lived longer, I think John would have made more films as a director," end quote. Of course, he did still continue writing and producing, and he actually had a lot of success, with the best example being the Home Alone series, which he wrote and produced, which I actually did not realize.
I didn't know that either. That's crazy.
I had no idea.
I do feel like they are set in Chicago, though, which would make sense.
Now that I know, I can totally see it, because the style fits with his style in a lot of ways.
Definitely.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Now, just like Candy, John Hughes would also pass away on the younger side. He wasn't in his 40s, but he was only 59 when he passed away, the morning of August 6th, 2009. He also died from a heart attack. With that, I gotta ask you, Brandon, was this the first John Hughes movies you've ever seen? And did you know anything about him? Especially about his teen movies, which I feel like everyone knows, kind of, at least partially.
This was not my first John Hughes movie. My first John Hughes movie was The Breakfast Club. I've seen The Breakfast Club multiple times, and I've seen Planes, Trains, and Automobiles before when I was younger.
Nice.
And of course, I did know about John Hughes growing up in the Midwest. It's a big deal to have movies in the Midwest. And then also going to film school in Chicago. Of course, we talked about John Hughes, and we talked about Siskel and Ebert, because those are kind of like the greatest exports of Chicago's like contribution to the film industry. And yeah, I mean, I've always wanted to watch more of John Hughes movies because the two that I've seen have been favorites of mine.
I mean, yeah, ironically, those are the two films of his that I've also seen, and I also do want to watch more of his movies because I like The Breakfast Club. I think it's a good film, but it's really Planes, Trains, and Automobiles that has always been very close to my heart. And I will say, I think a big part of that is also Steve Martin and John Candy, which kind of leads me to my next question of, thoughts on their performances and kind of, the fact that they are in a way playing themselves.
Yeah, I have seen Steve Martin before, of course. He's great. Probably one of the greatest comedians ever.
100% agree.
John Candy, this is the only thing I've ever seen him in. And I did want to say, John Candy has always reminded me of Chris Farley, not only because they're funny and died young, but they also have this kind of air about them where you can just tell that they have such a big heart and that they care so much. And it comes from a place of like insecurity. And I don't want to say that I love that because I think it's really terrifying and like sad for people to go through that. But I relate to it. I feel like that's why I've been drawn to kind of being an entertainer in a way. Yeah, so that was always kind of my thing. Obviously, Chris Farley is a legend. He's from Wisconsin, and John Candy is from Canada and kind of has that similar Midwestern aura to him, I guess. Then you throw Steve Martin, honorary Canadian, and John Candy, actual Canadian, into a movie written and directed by a native Chicagoan, and you kind of get like this perfect recipe of like everything that I like. This was, of course, an enjoyable experience.
And I mean, I did want to say to your point about, John Candy, I completely agree. And in a way, I feel like that almost endears you to him, even though at the same time, it makes you very sad knowing that, like, yeah, it did come from a place of hurt. The type of person that you can tell he is, even without ever having met him, makes you just automatically love him as a person. And like, this is the only thing I've seen of his work. And I feel like I knew from like 5 seconds that he was just an amazing person that, yes, had a lot of demons, but at the same time was one of like the kindest and most genuine people ever. After talking about how they literally cut out like over 2 hours of stuff from this movie, I just also wanted to bring up the point that I think that this movie is perfect at the length that it is. It does not need anything more. It flows so well. Nothing feels like it dwells too long or too short. I feel like structurally this film is so good because they got rid of all that extra stuff.
I think that you don't really need more than this, and it already conveys everything you want it to. Like, it doesn't feel like there's anything missing and like we needed to spend any more time in this world. Not saying that like in a negative way, but it feels good like at its length. And it also doesn't feel like super short in a weird way. Like, it feels like everything has been lived through and fully realized, kind of unlike The Lion King, where it feels like it's a little bit short.
Yeah, because I feel like a lot of comedies are kind of walking a tightrope of feeling too short or too long, and this does not. This feels like the perfect length. It's kind of this feeling of, when you finish watching it, you feel like you spent a sizable chunk of time watching a movie, but it's the amount of time that you want to give, pretty much. That's the best way I can describe the way I feel about it. Now, I don't have any more other questions or things to suggest or say. I think everyone can kind of guess my thoughts on the film. I guess the last thing that I wanted to bring up was the fact that this movie is also just hilarious. And the only reason that it's rated R is because the F word is said 19 times in one scene. And I love that. I love that they actually stuck to their guns and did that. Now, do you want to give your score first, or should I? Or do you want to say something first?
I will say that I feel like I will enjoy probably all of John Hughes' movies, much like William Goldman. And I bring up William Goldman specifically because I feel like those are the two writers that I've seen that have perfectly captured human emotion and also something else. Like, I think William Goldman is a great dramatic writer. He also has some great comedic moments, but I think John Hughes is a great comedic writer who has some dramatic moments, but they both are rooted in this kind of like,
I agree with that,
very human feeling and very like real approach to the world. They're not trying to sell you a movie, essentially. They're trying to tell you a story that you believe.
I completely agree with that, yeah.
That's kind of what I want out of a movie. That's what I want out of, I guess, any visual media, including like television, stuff like that. And I also wanted to bring up, I've mentioned before, my favorite TV show of all time is Community. And I feel like this movie, in a way, kind of set the stage and set the tone for the kind of comedy that I like, where it is comedy, yes, but it's not just comedy. You are telling a story first and foremost. You are kind of dealing with human emotions first and foremost, and then you're adding funny moments on top of that, funny situations, crazy things that they say that are happening to them, all kinds of that stuff. And that is what I value most. It's not to get as many jokes off as you can. It's to tell a story using comedy as a medium. And I know I've talked about this before. This is something I'm very passionate about. This is why I'm drawn to comedy specifically, because I feel like it's the best vehicle for telling these super kind of like dark and personal and deep stories like we get in this movie with Dell's character, who is kind of just like alone in the world, and that's all he ever will be. Almost like Eleanor Rigby. I mean, I'll just say my score. This is a 4.5. And the reason it's a 4.5 is because I like The Breakfast Club better, and I would probably give it a 5.
Well, yeah, and I agree. And I also did want to add, I think this film, it's very difficult to make a movie with a character that is like as grumpy and in a lot of ways as rude as Neil Page. And on the other side, a character that can be very annoying like Del Griffith while making it funny. And this movie does it. It makes it funny, and I feel like that's because it's real, and that's because they feel like real people, so we understand why they're acting like that. And on top of that, it has those like dramatic moments that make it more than just, oh, haha, they're being grumpy or they're being annoying or something like that. So I completely agree. Kind of, you mentioned that it's a 4.5 because you like The Breakfast Club more. Again, as I said before, I prefer this to The Breakfast Club, so this is a 5. I don't remember what I gave The Breakfast Club, but in my opinion, this is actually a perfect comedy film. So even if I prefer The Breakfast Club, this would still be a 5.
I agree with that, and I think that maybe The Breakfast Club is also a 4.5, but the other reason I put this at a 4.5 is because I also rated Superbad that, and I feel like both, I mean, those are kind of my two favorite comedies that we've done. And I feel like there will be a comedy that I don't know, that I'm not expecting, that will be higher than that. That will be a 5. But these are like so close. And I'm waiting for that one that'll like push it over the edge. But I think that's the other part of why I feel like this is a 4.5. Because to me, those are two examples of like what I want in comedy. And I like to reserve my 5s.
Oh, I know, believe me. And you guys know I like to just give out 5s to every other movie. So yeah, that's why it's a 5 for me.
I've only done 3 5 movies on the entire podcast.
I don't know if I've ever done a 5 album yet.
That's a good point. I don't think you have. I think Lord was a 4.5. I think that might have been the closest we've gotten.
Yeah, that was very close. But I mean, regardless, this was a very successful week, if I say so myself.
I agree. We kind of didn't know what to do with Planes, Trains, and Automobiles forever. And eventually David was just kind of like, well, the Beatles are popular. And I was like, yeah, we haven't done a lot of like 60s music. We should probably do that. So I hope that everyone is still alive after this episode. And I hope the fact that we've addressed it multiple times will mean that they are still alive. And with that, that brings us to the end of the episode, the end of this kind of special, kind of Thanksgiving episode. We have a very interesting episode for you next week. Personally, I'm predicting it's going to be the longest one ever. I don't know for sure. So look forward to that. And you know what? You can even watch the movie right now on our Instagram because we tell you what it is a week in advance. And by the time you're listening to this episode, we will have told you what next week's movie is. And that Instagram is, of course, at Uncultured Pop Culture. David, can you tell them what they can find in the bio of our Instagram?
Well, if you click on that link tree in the bio, you will be linked to literally everything. You can find our Letterboxd. You can find our Radar Musics. You can also find that in the description of this very episode if you want to scroll down there. And if you do scroll down there, you might see a little thing where you can actually rate our show. And we highly encourage you to do it because, hey, that really helps us. And if anyone wants to review us on Apple Music, we would love that very first review if you got like 2 seconds.
Tell your family, tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell the cashier at your local grocery store because I'm sure they are also interested. Everyone loves Uncultured Pop Culture.
And tell your boss if you want to get fired.
Exactly. Put this on at work and you can start off the episode with us saying, are you ready for this fucking episode? And I think, hopefully with that one, we have hit the quota of 19 in this episode. And on that note, we will see you next week.
See you next week.